Welcome to KSOK Uncensored. Tonight's guest is Dr. Rainer Zitelmann. And Zitelmann, pardon me, Doctor, because he has two PhDs. And in Germany, they do honor in the title both PhDs, which I think is amazing. So I had to respect that and bring that up. Thank you so much for coming on to KSOK Uncensored. Wow, you've achieved so much. I have to share with the audience. You're a world-renowned author, historian, sociologist, successful businessman, and real estate investor. Anything else you want to add to this massive amount of achievements?
Oh no, it's all correct. Yes, it's all correct. I didn't do it all at the same time. From origin, I'm an historian, and then later on, I founded my own company, but I sold it 7 years ago, and now I returned back writing books and doing my research and traveling all over the world to explain to people why capitalism is not the problem but the solution.
Yes. And there are so many myths. And that's why I like that your new book is really bringing to the forefront all of these, you're debunking myths about capitalism. And so many kids, especially those that are school age right now, they are being taught in the United States, at least at a very young age, that capitalism is the enemy. Talk to us about your newest book, the title, why you chose debunk the myths about capitalism.
Yes, this is correct. And what you said about school, it's not only in the United States, it's also in Europe. They hear so much about the evils of capitalism, but they don't hear almost nothing about the evils of socialism. I'll give you one example. In the end of the 50s, there was the biggest socialist experiment in history. This was Mao's so-called Great Leap Forward. 45 million people died, 45 million people. And if I travel around, I ask people everywhere in the world, have you heard about it at school? And whether I speak to 30 people, to 300 or to 3,000, always only very few people raise their hand. They haven't heard about it. Teacher didn't tell them. And another thing about capitalism, my book starts, the first chapter is, they'll tell you capitalism is to blame for hunger and poverty. But the fact is, before capitalism, 200 years ago, 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. 90%. Today it's 9%. This happened never before in history. It's an amazing story. At this time, there were only 1 billion people on Earth. Today it's 8 billion people. But now it's only 10%. Of course, 10% people in living in poverty, it's also bad. But it was 90%. And what's more important, half of this reduction happened over the last decades. Even in 1981, 43% the world lived in poverty. And I think this is an amazing story. And there are so many myths about capitalism. I'll give you another example. They tell you capitalism leads to monopolies. Of course, this is correct. We have some big tech, Google, Amazon, Facebook. But what's more important, capitalism destroys monopolies. Capitalism, not the government. I give a lot of examples in my book. Tell you a funny thing. 2007, there was a headline in one of the most important British newspapers, Guardian, who will ever break the monopoly of MySpace? Do you remember MySpace, what it is? Yes, but today, if I talk to young people, they don't know what it is. Or the same year in Forbes magazine, there was a headline, who will ever catch the cell phone king? It was Nokia. Who has a Nokia cell phone today?
Right,
or do you remember Xerox with photocopies? They had 90%, 95% market share in the United States. Or Kodak with cameras. They had 85%. Who destroyed it? The government? No, capitalism. Capitalism can lead to monopoly sometimes, but then there's competition and then they will destroy. The only monopoly that is hard to destroy is a state monopoly, the monopoly by the government. Or maybe I give you a third example. People blame capitalism for environmental destruction and for climate change. But if you look here, I have here, this is a new edition. You can get it free on the internet. It's from the Heritage Foundation, Index of Economic Freedom, 500 pages. They're published every year. And if you compare, this is a ranking how economically free are countries, or you can call it the capitalism ranking, 177 countries. And then there's another ranking from the Yale University Environmental Performance Index. And I compared both of them. And if you compared, you see the most economically free, the most capitalist countries have the best environmental standards. I give you one number only. I live in Germany, as you hear with my accent, and we had East and West Germany. West Germany, capitalism, East Germany, socialism. The same country, the same people, the same language, the same history, only different economic system. But the CO2 emissions in East Germany were 3 times higher than in West Germany. Environmental standards were worse. And by the way, maybe for people who listen to us, beside my book, I can recommend you, I produced a film and I got award for best short movie at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas last year. The film is called Life Behind the Berlin Wall. You can Google it. It's comparing East-West Germany. 17 minutes, you can get it for free. And now I ask you one question. What do you guess? How long did you have to wait for a car in socialist East Germany? Give me a guess. What do you think?
Wait for a car. 15 minutes.
In East Germany, to buy one, when you get it, you have to wait.
Oh, I was thinking like hailing a cab or something. To purchase a car. Purchase a car. Oh my gosh, I have no idea.
Okay, in West Germany, it was like in the United States. You could go in every store, buy it, and then drive away. In East Germany, the shortest time was 12 and a half years. 12 and a half years. And the longest time, 17 years. And what did you get in the end? The worst car ever. It was the so-called Trabi, the worst car ever. And these are a lot of facts that people don't know. Or another fact, 16% had a landline, a telephone, 1989 in East Germany. 16%, 1/6. In West Germany, 99%. And 27% had to share their toilet with other people, so in East Germany. So these are a lot of facts people don't, but you can find it, first of all, in this film, Life Behind the Berlin Wall, and of course, you find a lot of facts like this in my book about the myth about capitalism.
Yes, I really want to watch Life Behind the Berlin Wall. That sounds very interesting. And I like that you can learn so much in an hour and a half. That's important. I want to talk about something that, we just uncovered, that Bernie Sanders has authored a book. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. And in this book, he talks about how there should no longer be billionaires in the United States. This book is the complete opposite of your book, In Defense of Capitalism. Talk to me about what Bernie is, how he is even making this make sense for the reader to be angry about something that has been such a positive for decades.
I recommend to people, first of all, of course, please read my book. But it's also not a bad idea to read a book from Bernie Sanders that you see how dangerous he is. For example, you mentioned this is a whole chapter that we should get rid of all billionaires in the United States. But now if you look all over the world, even in all developed countries, you have billionaires. For example, even in Sweden, if you adjust it to how many people live there, to the population, there are 60% more billionaires than in the United States, adjusted to the population. Wow. And of course, in Germany and everywhere in Denmark, we have billionaires. Even in Venezuela, there's only 1 billionaire. The only countries without billionaires, and this is what Bernie Sanders, he tells us, we want a country without billionaires. Should I tell you what these countries are? This is North Korea, this is Cuba, and some very poor African countries. So if Bernie Sanders tells us we should get rid of all billionaires in the United States, for me it's the same as we should be like North Korea or like Cuba.
Yeah.
Of course,
communist.
Of course, he would say something different. He would say, no, I like this Scandinavian Nordic socialism. This shows only that he doesn't understand anything about other countries and about history, because it's true there was a kind, what they call democratic socialism in Sweden, but it's 50 years ago. You missed it, because then this kind of socialism in Sweden was a total disaster. And Swedish people were smart, they understood it, they abolished this. And I give you one example. In Sweden, of course, they have high income tax today, but in New York City, you have also high income tax. But in Sweden, they abolished wealth tax. They have no wealth tax. They have no inheritance tax. They have no gift tax. So if Bernie tells us, let's be like Sweden, I say, I agree. First thing, let's abolish gift tax. Let's abolish inheritance tax. Let's abolish every wealth tax. But he says the contrary. And another thing, next thing. Here, I mentioned this index of economic freedom. You can call it the capitalism ranking. It's 500 pages, and I read it. And they have a rating how capitalist or how economically free are countries. And now the shocking news for this new edition 2023. There are 16 European countries, 16 more capitalist as the United States. Can you imagine this? In Europe, people think United States, this is pure capitalism, 100%. They have no welfare state. I know it better, but this is what people think. I tell them, look here, in the meantime, and we have not enough capitalism in Europe. We have too big welfare state, too much government. But if today, even, Sweden, we spoke about Sweden, is here at rank 10, and United States is ranked 25. What does it mean for the United States?
Yeah, it just shows we're no longer the leader of the free world. And I feel like people mistakenly think we are still. And sadly, we are circling the drain in that respect. That's wild to think there are 16 more capitalist countries than the United States. I think that's an eye-opener for the listeners. It was for myself as well.
Yes, even there are 24, but only in Europe it's 16. Only European countries.
Only
16.
Europe. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So we are ranked 25 out of the world.
Yes, only ranked 25. And
wow.
And I tell you another interesting thing. I was in Vietnam some month ago to promote some books from me. And they call themselves socialist with the Communist Party. But I tell you something. It's harder to find a Marxist in Vietnam than to find in the university in the United States or in Europe. I was there at 4 different universities in Vietnam. And for example, they invited me to a workshop. How can we improve image of wealthy people? Can you imagine something at a university in the United States, a workshop, how can we improve image of rich people? No, never. And they invited me there. And if you compare Vietnam, for example, they have not a very good rank there. I think only 72, but they gained 20 points in the last 25 years. And United States lost. So Vietnam has now the best ranking they had ever, and United States has the worst ranking they had ever. And it should give us food of thought. If even a country that calls themselves socialist with a communist party, it's harder to find a Marxist than to find at universities in the United States.
On that, it's interesting. So I live here in Portland, Oregon, and there's a lot of homelessness. And someone made it on the news recently because there's homeless camps just right in people's neighborhoods. And this one homeless camp caught on fire, and it ended up catching a Vietnam veteran's house on fire. And he said he made it on the news, and he was saying, I've had to put this fire out 3 different times because who knows what they're doing in their tents. And he said, I felt safer in Saigon than I do here in my house in Portland, Oregon. So that really speaks volumes to where we are going, especially in leftist cities in the United States. But we're not going in the right direction when you have a statement like that being made. And hopefully it resonated with some people that aren't awake at this point in time. I wanted to ask you to break down for folks that aren't 100% aware, what is the role of government in a capitalist society?
Government should do 2 things. They should look, we need a strong police, we need a strong army. So this is the main purpose of our government. And they should be much better in this, to protect people with a strong police, not like left-leaning people tell defund the police and something like this. No, we need a strong police, we need a strong army, but we don't need a strong government in the economy, because entrepreneurs know better what to produce and consumers should decide. Because this is the difference between the planned economy and between free market economy. In the free market economy, in the end, it's a consumer decision what is produced, how much and what, and not the government. In a planned economy, government makes the decision. And you see what happens if the government is too strong. I can tell you an example from Germany. In Germany, we have a crazy energy policy. There was an article in Wall Street Journal 4 years ago with the headline, "The dumbest energy policy in the world." This was about Germany. What did they do? First, they phased out nuclear power plants. What is crazy? If you care about things like climate change, you should have more nuclear power plants, not less. So first, they phased out nuclear power plants. Then they started to phase out coal power plants. Then they forbid fracking. What are they doing now? In Germany, we import LNG gas, fracking gas from United States. Isn't it crazy? They forbid it in their country, and then we have to import. They made us dependent on Russian gas. This is all when the government makes the decision and not entrepreneurs make the decision. And I think Joe Biden, he will now go in a similar direction with his Green Deal and how he calls it. So maybe it should remind people on Roosevelt's New Deal, but this was also a disaster. It was the crisis was prolonged with this so-called New Deal. And maybe what you don't know, after the Second World War, there were 91% maximum tax rate in the United States. So we should be happy that we have this behind us now,
right?
And not to remind people for this.
Well, on that note, I had written this down because I wanted your opinion on it. At a UN meeting in 2019, Trump said, "Mark my words, Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy." And it flashed over to the German diplomats, and they were laughing and shaking their head. But now you see that Germans are stockpiling wood, right? Because energy is incredibly expensive, and really relying on wood burning stoves more and more. It looks like Trump was right.
Absolutely, he was right. You have to know, I don't agree with everything that Trump did or said, but in this way, he was absolutely right. And the Germans who laughed at him, they are crazy. And they should, but I found no one in Germany who said now, "Excuse me, we were wrong and he was right." No, what they tell us now, oh, we have now only this problems with high energy prices because Ukraine war. But it's a lie, because even before the war in Ukraine started, Germany had the highest prices for electricity in the whole world. The highest price in the whole world. Why? Because they changed it from a free market economy to a planned economy, and planned economy never worked. This is what people don't know. In the last 100 years, there were 24 different experiments with socialism, 24 experiments. They tried it in Cuba in another way than in Korea, in the Soviet Union in another way than in Poland maybe, but it worked nowhere. 100 years. And they want to try it again and again. Do you remember, it's not long ago, in the end of the 90s, there was Venezuela, when Hugo Chavez came to power. And I remember this. Intellectuals in the United States and in Europe, they were really fascinated. They called it, oh, it's the socialism of 21st century. They really loved Hugo Chavez. They loved him. But what happened? 1,000,000% inflation rate was there. 10% of the people fled. Democracy is abolished, and people live in hunger, in poverty now in Venezuela.
Yes.
This is what always happens when you have Venezuela. And now, why did I tell you this? Because 50 years ago, 1970, Venezuela was one of the 20 richest countries in the world. One of the 20 richest countries in the world. Democracy, and it was a great country. Then they started step by step. More regulation and all this stuff, what you do now in Europe, what you do in the United States, of course, situation became worse. And then people made wrong decision. They saw things become worse, but they made it even more worse by voting for Hugo Chavez. And this should be a warning signal. It can happen everywhere. It can happen also in the United States. Some people think, no, it can't happen there. The same, for example, in the 30s, they said in Germany, when Adolf Hitler came to power, they said, no, in Germany, this is a nation with so much culture and literature and tradition. Things like this can't happen. No one could imagine. But terrible things can happen everywhere in the world.
Yeah, they absolutely can. I want to ask you, what does capitalism have to do with freedom?
I think these are only two different words, capitalism and economic freedom. Economic freedom means that you make the decision for your life. You can found your own company. It's not by the state. You can found a company and you can take your opportunities. You don't have to expect things from the government. And maybe I tell you another thing to explain what it means. I was in Argentina half year ago, and they expect everything to get from the state. This is the socialist mentality. And they have double-digit inflation since 1945 every year. Only in the 90s they had 10 years without. Every year, since the end of Second World War, every year double-digit inflation. And so they expect everything, state should give me everything, this is my right. It's a little bit the mentality as we have in Europe and with some people also in the United States. But now they start to understand. Sometimes you should tell people in an easy way to understand what capitalism means and what I call classic liberalism. I had a lecture there, young people in a city in Argentina, and there was one young man sitting in the first row. To be honest, he was not really handsome, so I thought maybe he has no girlfriend. I asked him, hey, do you have a girlfriend? He said, no, I don't have. And then I asked him, but would you like to have a really pretty girlfriend? And he said, yes, of course I would. And then I asked him, and what do you expect? Who will bring you this pretty girlfriend? The government, the state? He said, no, I don't believe. I said, so, but who's responsible to get this pretty girlfriend? They said, that's me. Yes, now you understand. This is what also capitalism means. The same with money, with all important things. Don't expect it from the government. The government should only protect your property. The government should protect the country with an army, with the police. That's what the task is from the government, but not to act like to handle the economy. This is not the real task, because politicians can't do it. This is the task of entrepreneurs.
Yes, and I like that. I am going to use that at some point. Wow, that really drives it home. Imagine if the government supplied your your spouse. That would be scary. Yes, we're definitely in a welfare state. I want to go back to, we rank number 25. So the 24 countries that rank higher in capitalism than us, is one of our downfalls the government interference that we are experiencing, these high levels of government interference?
Yes, there are a lot of. You have too much debt. Yes, this is a big problem. Yes, more and more debt year by year. This is one problem. The other problem, you have too high taxes. Of course, not in every state the same. In Florida, I know, and in Texas, it's much better than in California or New York City. But you have too high taxes, and what the real problem is, I saw now one number that the 20% of people who earn most in the United States, that they pay 80% of the taxes. So this is when people tell you rich people, they don't pay taxes. This is wrong. No. Taxes are proper regulation. You need. I read today in New York City they had a new law, I think 1 or 2 years ago, only to be allowed to wash the hair of someone. If you go to cut your hair, you need a permission, and you have to learn 500 hours and to pay $13,000 to get the permission to wash someone their hair. Something you do every day,
Wow.
I do every day. How many hours did you learn it, right? How much did you have to pay for this? We know it, everything. And you have so much crazy regulations. I think we should get rid of a lot of regulations. So this is a big problem.
That is. And you know what that made me think of? I lived in New York City 15 years ago for a year, and I went from Portland, Oregon to New York City. And so I had to find a hair salon there. At that point, I was platinum blonde hair. So it was an expensive upkeep. But the price, I say it would cost me $150 here in Portland. When I went to New York, it was $400 plus dollars to get my hair done, the same way I would have gotten it done in
Yeah.
Portland, Oregon. And the other difference is there was one person that cut it, one person that did the highlights, and the other person that did your blowout. So you were touching three different people and you had to check your coat. So you're tipping four different people before you leave the hair salon. And it just shows you those regulations, that extra schooling that these folks have to go through. You are the one who ends up paying for it as the consumer.
Yes, and maybe there are two other persons who make all the bureaucracy, the paper stuff, so that you don't see. Maybe yes, this is another this all this with the bureaucracy, and this was the problem in socialist countries, and it becomes the problem is we have all these things in Europe that doesn't work well. And I read a book 10 years ago. It was a great book by Samuel Craig, Becoming Europe. It was a warning for the United States, a warning that United States become Europe, but in a bad way. And I think this is the plan from Joe Biden, and it was a plan from Obama. They admire Europe, but we have so many problems here in Europe. And how did the United States become such a great country in former decades? With capitalism, of course. With capitalism.
Yeah, I know. What's happening is wild. So many people are captured and they're misled. I want to ask your thoughts on something that's happening here in Oregon and in other states that are more on the liberal side of things. We are starting to see new build homes where gas outlets, where you can get your gas for a stove or your gas for a fireplace, those are being banned. So people are being forced to either use the electricity grid or to have a wood burning stove, which is my preference. But then at the same time, we're also seeing where they're villainizing wood burning stoves for air particulates. What do you think of when you think of city ordinances passing to where you can no longer have gas hookups in new build homes?
It's funny because we have the same discussion right now in Germany, and the people who are pro this, they call themselves like social and caring for people with not so much money, but the contrary is correct. They make it much more expensive to build new homes, even more expensive. And this is always too much government regulation. Of course, I'm not against every regulation, but it's not this way. The more regulation, it's better. And there are some politicians, they wake up every morning and they think, what can we forbid today? Or how can we call for higher taxes, or what can we forbid today? And I think if you look, for example, further to the environment, I have here in my book, I have one chapter, it's only about climate change and environment. And I think only capitalism can solve this problem. I give you one example. Here I have this, I think almost everyone has it today, like this cell phone. Before the cell phone was invented, it was a typical capitalist innovation. You needed 30 different devices, a computer, a camera, a telephone, and a GPS, and there are more than 30. Today, you need only the small device. It's better for the environment. It's
Right.
better for protecting resources. The same with, when I was young, I had this LPs, this big disc. So then later on, this were this smaller CDs. And today, my girlfriend, who is much younger than me, she laughs at me. Why do you buy CDs? No one does it. She gets it from Spotify or whatever. There are no resources, not so much resources. And even my father, his birthday tomorrow. He's 94 years old, but he reads also a lot of books still. And I have maybe 6,000-7,000 books at my home. He doesn't read books today, but only with his Kindle. So it means it saves the environment. This is all capitalism. Innovation means
Right.
it's also better for the environment. And the worst environmental standards were in socialist countries. And this is what my book is about. I tell you honestly one thing. I don't expect that anti-capitalists will buy my book. I had another interview and they asked me, do you think you can convince anti-capitalists with your book? And I said, no, I don't think so. It's but why did you write it? I told him, I don't think that they will buy it. They prefer to buy a book from Bernie Sanders or people like this. They prefer to buy book number 35, Why Capitalism is Evil, than only to touch one book like mine. I see it when I post it on the internet, social media, Twitter, or Facebook, and then there are always left-leaning people. This book is totally shit, and so it's all wrong. And then I ask them, have you read the book? No, I would never read a book like this. I don't
Exactly.
have fear from other. I read books from people who think different from me. I have no fear from this, but they have fear. So I wrote my book for people like you and maybe some of the people to listen for us who are maybe emotionally more pro-capitalism, pro-entrepreneurship, pro-free market, but I provide with all the facts, with all the arguments. If you look
Yes.
in the bibliography of my book, I used 360 books and scientific papers for research, and I did my own research. Of course, not everyone likes or has time to read 360 books, and some of them are written in a very complicated way, but not my book. If you can understand everything, also with the accent there, what I tell you now, then you can understand the book, because I like to explain things in an easy way. And I wrote it for people who are pro-capitalism, that they can win every discussion. Even you don't
Yes.
have to read the whole book. For example, next week maybe you have a discussion about inequality, or then the other week about monopolies, or about greed, or about climate change, or about poverty. You have only to read one chapter, and then you have all the facts, and I can guarantee
Yes.
you will win every discussion with these people. And we need
Yes.
all the facts.
Yes, we do. And it strengthens our resolve, which is very important. And we need to be able to have those conversations and know what we're talking about. Where can people find you and where can they buy your book?
You can order it on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble. I recommend, to be honest, not to order one book. Order please at least three, to give it to your friends who are on the same page. Some people criticize me. He want to sell his book. Of course I want to sell his book. This is why
Yeah.
I'm writing books. I know a lot of authors. I never met an author who wrote a book and no one should buy it. No, I wrote down a goal. Hopefully, you can help me to reach it. This should be a bestseller in the United States. And I travel all over the world. No one pays me for this. It costs a lot of money. I told you this book is to be published in 30 different countries. 30 different countries.
Amazing.
Next week, I go to Greece. I was in Poland. I was in Czech Republic. I will go to Korea. I will go to Latin America, everywhere, because this is kind of my mission. I'm an historian, I studied it, but I want to explain people why capitalism is not the problem, it's a solution. So I would be very happy if you get one on Amazon. And then the other thing, if you read it and you like it, please make a short review on Amazon to tell other people, I will read it, what you liked with this book. So it will really help.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, I love this. We need to do that. I'm excited to read it. All right, Doctor. I really appreciated having you on. What a refreshing conversation. This is fantastic. Thank you for everything you're doing. I'm excited to share this with my audience. And I appreciate you spending, I know it's late where you're at, but I appreciate you spending your evening with me here on KSOK Uncensored.
Thank you so much, and hopefully it's not our last conversation. There's a
I
lot
agree.
more to talk about. It. Maybe next time we talk about this film, you look at Life Behind the Berlin Wall,
Yes.
and let's have the next conversation about this.
It's a deal. It's a
Okay.
deal. It's a deal. I love
Yes.
it. Awesome.
Have
Thank
a
you
great
so
day.
much. You as well.
Good.
Talk to you soon.
Goodbye.
All right. Goodbye. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to KSOK Uncensored. What a remarkable guest. He's achieved so much in life. Please check out his book and see me here next Thursday, KSOK Uncensored.